Welcome, everyone. My name is Sarah Ray. I'm from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us tonight at Vermicomposting. I hope you are excited about learning about what worms can do for you in your garden and your composts. Tonight, our partner is with the Bloomfield Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee. So I'm going to have Charlie explain about the committee, and then we're going to turn this over to Tricia and Peter Halverson for their presentation. Charlie?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And thanks for partnering with us on this exciting program on vermicomposting. I'm the chair of the Bloomfield Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee, and we are the town's energy task force. We're an appointed committee, and we have a number of people. We're all volunteers, and we have, beyond that, we have some volunteers who work with us on various projects in town. And you can find us on the town website. It's a little tricky to get to us. You have to hit government and then go to boards. And then under boards, we are Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee. We're revamping a website, and we'll have all our projects that we're working on and some history about the committee up there very soon. And you can also see us in the Bloomfield Messenger. We've started a green news section every week in the Bloomfield Messenger, the little online newspaper. And so keep track of us through that and on the website. We meet once a month. We're meeting virtually the third Thursday at 4:30, and we promise to have you finished by 6. And our agenda is pretty broad and wide. We're looking at solar panels for more municipal buildings. We're looking at a variety of different recycling options in town, including more composting and textile recycling. We sponsor the Shred Day every year in town, where we do confidential document shredding and also the electronics recycling, getting all those big electronics out of people's houses and out of the dump and getting them properly recycled. This is, we've done a variety of energy efficiencies for the town buildings to reduce the costs to Bloomfield and reduce the use of fossil fuels. And this year is really the year of the tree, seriously, for the town. We've undertaken a big project to look at the tree canopy in town and look at what we can do to educate people about trees, how good they are for us, and start planting more native trees that are great for the animals and birds, and also for cooling and just general good health, public health. So that's it. Electric school bus is on our list of things that we're looking at. Electrifying the transportation system is really a big item. And so lots and lots of things. Please join us. We'd love to have more people involved, and thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to our vermicomposters, or back to Sarah for the introduction. But thank you.
And I will include a link to your webpage in our list of resources that we'll be sending out soon to everybody that came tonight. So tonight our presenters include Tricia, who became a certified master gardener from the UConn Extension Center in 2014 and a certified master composter in 2016. Pete became a certified master gardener from UConn's Extension Center in 2019 and a certified master composter in 2019 as well. Tricia and Pete are married to each other and have lived in the town of Groton, Mystic, since 1979. Thank you guys for presenting tonight.
Okay.
Thanks for having us.
I will go ahead and share the screen so we can get started. Okay, Sarah, how's it look? Thumbs up, good. As Sarah mentioned in the introduction, we both have been certified in the Master Gardener and the Master Composter programs. Our interest was it was environmental and conservation. We do use all the compost we make, whether it's our backyard composter, which we've been doing for over 30 years, or the vermicompost, which we've been doing for just probably over 5 years. So we're not in the profession, we're not in the landscaping or that field, or chemists or scientists. We're really just homeowners. So this is more than a hobby because it's an interest, but we've been doing it for quite a while. So what we hope to do during this is, is share our experience more than anything else, because there's a very wide range of approaches and viewpoints and opinions. And so much is available online. Most of all the information we have is available online somewhere. We've learned through our certifications that to trust the .edu or .org sites for really validated information. But if you get information from a .com, it's always a good idea to then validate it. But there's just a lot of information out there. But tonight, we really hope to share some of our experience. So we'll probably illuminate where the things we do versus what other information is out there. Not that anything's wrong, just we know what we do better than what other people do. One of the benefits of programs like this and the certification programs is you meet so many people and you learn what other people do, and you get to exchange the ideas, which is a lot more interactive and valuable than just information off the internet or pages of a book. I will mention that the Master Composter Program for UConn has just announced that they're taking applications and registration for the next class. It's a flyer that's available. If you just Google UConn Master Gardener Master Composter Program, it'll become apparent where the registration flyer is that I just held up. The next classes begin at the end of February. They run for 6 weeks. One class a week from 6:30 to 9 o'clock. Of course, it's all online. I know they're going to try to do some field trips maybe in the summer that are very interesting, but it's a lot of like-minded people that care about the environment and care about composting. So I just want to acknowledge that Dawn Pettinelli from UConn Extension Center is the instructor for the Master Composter Program. In concert with Gail Reynolds, who's the Middlesex County Master Gardener Coordinator for the Extension Service, who teaches and works with Dawn on composting, and provided a lot of information and so much instruction and time, as well as the recently retired Cal Cush, who provides a lot of information and also contributed quite a bit of information for this presentation. The agenda, we're going to go back a little bit, talk general composting, because it's a little easier to get the relationship to vermicomposting. Trish took vermicomposting, did the worm day with the composting program, and did vermicomposting years before I got involved in it. She came back and said, hey, guess what? We're gonna have some worms in the basement. And I said, what? And had trouble getting my head around it all. But once I get the whole concept of composting and then the transition and the application of vermicomposting and what vermicomposting does, it made a lot more sense. But it does, if you just go on the street and tell somebody you have pet worms in your basement, it gets kind of a strange look on people's face. So we're going to talk a little bit basic of composting and then get into the vermicomposting. And Trish and I are going to go back and forth a little bit on the information in this presentation. So with that, Trish.
So some general things on composting. Composting is a controlled decomposition of organic matter, such as food or yard waste. And then the result is organic material that can be used as a source of soil nutrients and soil structure. It's nothing magic, but it is scientific and it can be done by anyone. Some of the benefits of composting is, once again, it adds organic nutrients to the soil. It improves the soil structure. It makes plants more resistant to disease. It decreases our garden and kitchen waste that we don't have to send to the incinerator. And it provides a source of mulch. And with composting, you don't really have to add much extra fertilizer. And compost won't leach into the waterways. So that's good.
In our area down by the shore, there's a lot of prohibitions from using certain fertilizers. We don't use either anyway, but for fear of it getting into the water streams.
So what you need for composting in general, but we also need for vermicomposting. So you need a carbon containing material. You need a nitrogen containing material. You need macro and microorganisms, which really have a big role. We need air as oxygen. We need moisture. We need warm temperatures, and we need a location.
As Trish mentioned, so the sources of carbon and nitrogen, just from a practical standpoint, sawdust, leaves, wood chips, newspaper, cardboard. The nitrogen, because it's about, you want a ratio of about 2 or 3 to 1 of higher in carbon, less in nitrogen. But you can get that from the grass clippings and kitchen waste and other sources of manure. This is an area where we highlighted what we're most familiar with that we see works. I don't use sawdust for fear of might be some unintended ingredients in the sawdust, whether it could be sawdust that might have gotten mixed up from pressure treated wood, which I wouldn't use because we do use the compost in our vegetable garden. I stay away from the wood chips for the same way, not sure what it is, but the leaves and newspaper and cardboard we use mostly for the carbon. And then our kitchen waste, it's almost unfathomable how much kitchen waste that we're able to put in our backyard compost bins, and that would have otherwise gone in a plastic bag and into the curbside pickup. We don't use grass clippings, I'll leave those in the lawn, but also from a practice, if people do fertilize, you don't want that necessarily going into your compost. Bins range, it's kind of like I mentioned, there's so many different approaches and ways of doing it, from just piles, purchased and manufactured containers, pallets that can be strung together, screen box, cubes that you see there, homemade bins, but also it's good to check with your municipality or if there's a recycling resource agency in your area, because they will frequently do almost giveaways or at cost sales and make available compost bins. Then that's a good place to get it, and it's almost a handout. So that's kind of the basics. And as we move into vermicomposting, broke it down to kind of a couple things, and it might seem in a reverse order. We started with the results first, because I think that's what's most important to kind of, and I had trouble at first getting my head around about why doing this and how can, what is it that these worms do that make it so valuable? And then what it takes to do it, what you need, and then how to go about doing it. So starting with what you get. You get castings, which is nothing more than worm manure. Until I got it, okay, there's horse manure, there's cow manure. Well, this is worm manure. And I mean, I had to break it down that simply, said, okay, now I got it. And then I kind of get my brain released and take off. And the castings that you get from vermicomposting are extremely nutritious. The compost is compared to a backyard compost, it's higher in nutrition, higher in phosphorus, higher in potassium, which are the 3 main ingredients that plant need. Nitrogen for the plant growth, phosphorus for the strong roots, and the potassium for all-around plant health. And when I took the Master Gardening course, I took it up in Brooklyn with John LaRusso, who's the extension service there. And he wanted to make sure he drilled it into our heads and had a neat saying and said, up and down and all around. So nitrogen for up, phosphorus for down, and potassium for all around, up and down and all around. And can't forget it. The worms do that by being very efficient at breaking down what they eat that you're going to put in your worm bin. It stimulates a lot of microbiotic activity. They secrete a mucus as well as their excrement that enriches and adds moisture content to it. Now we'll get into what you need. There's the worms, container, bedding materials, moisture, ventilation, temperature, as Trish pointed out at the very beginning. This is just like backyard composting, just applied a little bit differently.
All right, some interesting things about worms. There are many worms worldwide, 2,500 species of earthworms, and none are native to New England. I was very surprised to learn this, but I guess during the glacier period, all of our earthworms were destroyed and none remained. And so they were reintroduced by the Native Americans, Europeans. So let's take a look at the difference between the types of worms. There's earth movers and there's composters. So the earth movers like to be alone. They're solitary. They tunnel through the earth. They mix the soil strata. They do not produce a lot of organic matter, and they do not reproduce well in confinement, and they don't like disturbance. But composters, which is what we want, on the other hand, live in a mass, and they do live in a big group. They like to be together. They consume large amounts of organic matter, and they turn this into humus. They reproduce well in confinement, and they tolerate disturbance. So that's the kind of worms that we want to use for vermicomposting.
So that explains why you can't go dig up in your backyard or look under rocks and get any worms and throw them down in your basement in your compost bin, because it just,
They're not going to work.
right. Good news, I'm not going to go through the worm anatomy. I mean, there's the mouth, the middle bulge right in the middle is this for reproduction. And then the castings go through the intestine and out the other end.
So worms do not have eyes, but they do sense light, and they don't like light. So they hide. And that's a good thing to know. You don't have to worry about them squirming away because they want to hide. They don't have teeth. So they have gizzards to grind food. So they need grit, like soil or something, to make the food easier to digest. And they also can't chew because they don't have teeth. So the food needs to be moist. And the microbes can help to break it up for the worms to make it easier for them. They need moisture to breathe. It helps with the air exchange.
So worm reproduction is almost frightening. Each worm has both sexual organs. They can't self-fertilize, but two worms can both get pregnant. They can fertilize each other. They produce a cocoon of 2 to 3 eggs, sometimes a couple a week. The cocoons will hatch in 3 weeks. So you can get several cocoons per worm per week. It's almost like perpetual motion. So the math of that is that if you start with a typical starter, I'll say, of 1,000 worms in your bin, you could end up with 2,000 to 3,000 worms in 3 to 4 months. We don't experience that. I mean, there's some attrition there, but under the right conditions, they'll just multiply. So in searching for worms, other than a source that we'll mention at the end of the presentation, if you find people that do vermicomposting, very generally, usually they'll have worms they're able to give away. We got ours through a giveaway. And contacting Dawn Pettinelli, who I mentioned at the beginning, with an email saying, hey, you know anyone ready to give up some worms? Usually you can find them without having to buy them, because they just, in the right conditions, they just multiply and rapidly. So our experience is they are low maintenance pets. We haven't named them all, but it's comforting knowing they're down there. They're indoors. We have them in the basement, and I'll show some pictures in a little bit. You don't need the yard. There's really not much cost. You're getting rid of kitchen waste, and it's going there, and you're getting back that black gold, the compost. Composting worms won't survive outside. They're not really exotic, but they're unique red wigglers. There is a black market that you can't trust for getting red wigglers and composting worms. There is an invasive species that has become apparent in the last couple of years called the crazy snake worm, which also is certainly not appropriate. I'll just mention it because it can be mistaken, and generally the way to tell is it frankly got its name because of the way it behaves. It's not a real mellow worm like the red wigglers that are in your worm. These guys are very active. So
when you are trying to get worms for composting, you want to use the Latin name, Aerating fetida. That's the one listed on the top there. The other two I also think are also composting worms, but we usually see the first one, Aerating fetida. They're not native, but they are not invasive, and that's because they don't overwinter outside. So I guess if you insulate something outside, maybe they can live outside, but here it would just be too cold. So we've been using the Latin term probably more, but the common street name is red wigglers. And that's really what you ask for, but you have to make sure that you use the Latin term just to make sure you're getting the right ones. So some interesting worm numbers. If you put a 1 pound of worms in a 2 foot by 2 foot bin, which is about 10 gallons, then it will eat 1 pound of garbage, which would produce 1 pound of compost per day. Well, this is what they say, but we do not see that happening at all. But if you do, let's see, about 1,000 reg wigglers is equal to a pound. So that's a lot of worms. Usually what happens with us is we get about 2 gallons of castings every 6 months. That's about all we get.
So that's a little bit about the worms. So we're going to get into now several a little bit of the presentation about what kind of home do they need. So you can go online and find something that looks like that picture, worm-friendly habitat, but it's really easy to make your own. They can be wooden bins, plastic bins. Some might come with a drip tray or not. And if you go on the internet, you'll find some vermicomposters say you don't need a drip tray. It's dry, it doesn't make a big mess, but we do use a drip tray just in case it gets too moist and that there is anything leaching out, but we really haven't run into that. Trish mentioned a 2x2, 8-inch at the most, at the least, bin is ideal for the worms, and it's got to have plenty of holes for circulation so that they can get the air. This is a picture of where we have ours. Just briefly, the green tub there is where we keep a supply of shredded paper. We have the little pump sprayer to keep the worms moist and the bedding moist. The little blue tub there with all the dust on it, sawdust, is what we use. Frankly, we take some of the worms out, we take them, and we've gone to some elementary schools for science fairs and get to show them off. The kids absolutely love seeing the worms. We thought it would scare the heck out of the worms, but they end up liking to be the entertainment. And then this is a good picture, a better picture than any of the others, that show the rows of holes around the top of the tub. So that top tub is where we have the worms. The bottom tub, we kind of nest it and put a couple blocks in between them to keep it up, so they're not stuck together tightly, is what we use if anything does drip out. So that's kind of our drip tray. That's a picture. We're not marketing Sterilite or anything. I'm just saying we have a 10-gallon tub. It's about 20 inches long, 14 wide. It's about 13 high. You can get 8 inches. You have to reach down as much. You can go, higher. It's really your worms and the number of worms you have will kind of define how big a bin you need or multiple bins. For our pound of worms, or 1,000 worms, and it could be about 1,500 in there now. That works out really well, that size. And it's just from Home Depot or Cash Home Centers or True Value Centers.
And the tub should be a dark color. You shouldn't be able to see through it, because sometimes that's hard to find when you're shopping, but the worms want it to be dark. They don't want to see light. So you need to have it dark colors. Now we'll talk about bedding materials, because as you start to prepare to make something like this, you have to have bedding materials. We usually use shredded newspaper, but not glossy paper. Coconut core fiber is good to put in with the paper. That is, it's coconut shredded.
Shredded husks of the coconut, yeah.
Leaves chopped up with a mower, which
I
should say the ones that are in yellow are the ones that we actually put into. We don't put leaves in with this, but I guess you can. And then maybe a handful or so of soil or sand, because like I mentioned before, they need a little grit to swallow. I mean, not to swallow, but to
it helps with the process.
Eat the food. So so it's good to have this soil in there, and to sterilize soil, you microwave high for 90 seconds.
Because you don't want any unintended invasion of any kind of other bugs or pests going into the compost.
Yeah, you don't want to bring stuff in from outside. Shredded cardboard is okay, and peat moss can be used, but not recommended due to pH and holding too much water. So I'm not sure why they have that listed on there, because we would never use that. So this is the bedding material, again, shredded newspaper. So we put the newspaper through the shredder. I tried cutting it with the scissors, but when I did, when I brought it to the place when I was first making my bin, They said, no, it's got to be a lot smaller than that. So I said, oh, I'll just shred the newspaper. It would make it a lot easier.
And that's a picture of the core brick, which is until we were doing this, I had no idea it even existed. But if you Google core brick, you can find a ton of it on Amazon or other sites.
I think ours is called Cocoa Core or
Cocoa
something.
Core.
There's different brands, and I don't put very much in with that. So, but I guess it does seem to help. This is a picture of our bin. It's not very glamorous, the inside. But so the worms are all hiding in the bottom, the newspaper's on the top, and then the black is probably the castings that are coming out.
And you can, it's a good view of the holes for ventilation that are around the perimeter at the top.
So moisture is an important thing. You want the bedding to be very moist, like the wrung out sponge. If you think about that, take a sponge and squeeze it. It's still kind of damp. You don't want it dripping wet. Worms and microorganisms will die if it's too dry, but excessive wetness will create anaerobic conditions and maybe smells. We've had both problems. Our cellar was really moist at one point, and I felt that the bin was just too wet, and it did have maybe an odor. And then, and so I had to add more newspaper. But then we did some work on our basement and dried it all out. And so then the bin wasn't moist enough.
Yeah,
So
we put in a dehumidifier and probably didn't do a whole system engineering of it and realize it's going to be drying out the worms, and now it just takes more water. So we just adjust.
yeah, so you just have to be aware, because I wasn't thinking, and I think maybe I lost a few worms that way. But you do have water nearby that we can spray on when we check to make sure how much water is there.
As I mentioned, around the top of the bin, you're going to want to drill about 24 holes. These are, it's harder to see than intended. This isn't our bin, but these holes are about in the middle, but they can be around the top. The worms don't crawl out. They don't want to leave. They're very happy in their home. 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch holes, and some up to 12 on the bottom, just in case it gets too moist and it can drain out. And then some right in the top of the cover in the lid. And then, fluffing up the bedding to increase pore spacing in the bedding, so it makes it easier for air to circulate in the worm and the worms to breathe. I think most people's basements are kind of between 50 and 80 anyway, but that's one of the reasons why this method is primarily based for indoors. Although you will also see, if you go on the internet, people that show how to do vermicomposting, and they're outdoors in a climate like San Diego. They have to worry about putting it in the shade to keep them cool, as opposed to keeping them warm, as you would here. But 50 to 80 seems to be right in their sweet spot for where they're the happiest.
So for food, good scraps of fruits and vegetables was something that they enjoy. And then we might put coffee grounds. We normally don't put cereal, cornmeal, those kind of things in, but apparently it's fine. Loose tea bags, and then shredded newspaper also.
Yeah, I should have highlighted this. The shredded newspaper is something we do.
Yeah. So like any compost, you don't put any animal bones products, no butter, oil or greasy products, no dairy, and definitely no pet waste. And the other thing with the vermicomposting inside is they don't tend to like citrus. They don't like the cabbage family, and they don't like garlic or onions, hot peppers, and they would not eat anything with a seed. It's interesting, they don't eat seeds. And of course you wouldn't want them to eat seeds, because the seeds are for the birds. So it's interesting, but that's how you feed them.
So the dilemma there for us a little bit is we have to segregate. We have like a lot of people that compost, a metal bin on the counter. We put all the composting material in. It'd be really convenient if that in its entirety material could be used for the vermicomposting, but it can't. So Tricia ends up have to intercept some of the things before it goes in the countertop compost bin, because the worms just like everything that goes in.
Yeah, if you have a lot of orange
Outdoor
peels or
composting.
anything, you know, it might sit in your bin for a long time because they don't seem to like citrus for some reason. So to feed your worms, you just bury the food in the bedding. The worms will find the food, and then the food will be softened by the microbes before they eat it. And you usually feed them once a week. And if you were to go on vacation and say if we get to go on vacation again and you are away for 2 to 3 weeks, they should be fine. If you give them enough newspaper, they will just eat the newspaper and until you get back.
Yeah, there is no cottage industry for people out there looking to do worm sitting.
Yeah, right. You don't need it. There's other critters that can be in the bin. We have something in ours, but we're not really sure if it's a so big or
So
a mite. I'm not sure what it is. I know it's not a potworm, but these are some of the things listed: bacteria, mold, fungi that can be in your bin, but they do not smell.
yeah, it's really not a problem that you need to troubleshoot. So we've kind of gone through the basics of what the worms do, introduction to the worms themselves, the red wigglers, and then the home and the habitat that they need. So once they do their thing, and every 6 months or so, it's time to go get the castings out. So there's generally 3 methods to do it: migration method, alternate containers, or worm sorting. We've done 2 of those 3. Trish will kind of explain those.
So in the migration method, the worms move to the food. So you have your bin and you just put everything, push all the worm and bedding onto one side. And then you fill the empty side with fresh bedding and new food. And then the worms will eventually migrate over to the clean side. And then you can, this says you can harvest after 2 months, but I think maybe after a few weeks, you'd be able to harvest your castings on the dirty side.
So that's a good picture of the red wigglers, and then all the brown there is their castings. That's the black gold.
Mm-hmm. Another method is to just use alternate containers. So just have another container ready to use. After one is full of food, leave it alone and start another one. Move the worms over there, and then eventually dump the old one right into the garden. I suppose that's easy, but it seems to me like a waste of containers. But I'm sure some people like to do that. And then the third one, this is what we usually do, is we get a shower curtain. Well, this has nice newspaper, but we usually just put it on a shower curtain and pull off the castings from the top, put that in the containers because we're going to use that in our garden. And then the worms will keep going down to the bottom, and then you put them into your bin after you've cleaned them. When I first did this, I was worried that the birds might come and try to eat the worms. I don't know what I was thinking, but I've never had a problem with birds coming after me to get the worms.
No, but if you do this, keep an eye out for birds.
So I don't know.
So we've gotten to where then now you've harvested the compost, and it's a case of now what do you do with it? Assuming that you have plants or a garden, the various ways are much like your backyard compost. You can put a thin layer on top if you have a potted plant on top of the potting soil. You can mix it up into the potting soil beforehand or the garden soil, and use that kind of stash of mixed soil for potting or transplanting. Garden outside, for instance, or a plant or bush, you can scratch the surface around the base of the plant and sprinkle some of the compost. Also, it really works well to put some of the castings into a filter bag of some type, and you get those online as well. And then put that into a watering can or a water container, let it steep for a while until it looks like you would think it would look, the color, and use it as compost tea and use that to water the plants. And that perks up plants pretty quick.
And you can use it on your inside plants too. So it's nice. So as a review, this is just a list of what you would do if you were going to make a worm bin. You'd get a dark colored bin with a drip pan, put in some ventilation holes, obtain your red wigglers, and we're going to give you a place where you can get them if you're interested. Shred and soak your newspapers, wring the bedding out, and then fill your bin 1/3 to 1/2 full. Add the coconut core and a handful of sterilized soil or sand. Then bury your worms into their new home. Add some food, cover, and then just wait and check for adequate moisture and feed weekly. And then once or twice a year, you can harvest. And voila,
Yeah.
you've got it.
So this is really in the nutshell, everything we want to present on one sheet of paper.
Now, if you run into some problems like an unpleasant odor, you might have too much food, and then you can tell if you feed them weekly and you look the next week and there's still a lot of food there, then you're feeding them too much. Not enough air. Well, if you're not enough air, you might need to put more holes in, but that's, I don't know if that would be indicative of.
We've never seen that happen. It's
Yeah.
what we described in terms of number of holes works out pretty well. I mean, if you don't have enough holes and they're not breathing, you're going to end up just not having as many worms as you started out with.
And if you have fruit flies, just make sure you bury the food deeper so the flies can't reach them.
Otherwise, we really haven't experienced it. It's really pretty automatic and pretty easy. So we mentioned, go ahead, Trish, you want to explain the white
Oh.
ladies?
Okay, this is a place where you can get the worms. I've actually never had to buy from there, but I understand that these ladies in Rhode Island are a good source of red wigglers or Acina fetida worms. Also, but we were thinking that Dawn, who runs
Yeah.
this composter
Yeah.
program.
People will probably let her know when they have worms that they're ready to give away. If you go online, you can find others. I know there's others in Connecticut. This is just the one that we were most familiar with, although we haven't actually engaged with them.
But just make sure you use the Latin term. That's all. Don't try to buy anything. 'Cause
If you just say red wigglers, someone might try to give you something that they'll say is red wigglers. That's not really the right one.
who knew?
So for more information, I'll explain. So most of the universities throughout the country that have agriculture component to their curriculum or college have an extension service, but they'll have fact sheets, and UConn does, and that's a website for their fact sheet. It's a really good introduction for
Excellent.
vermicomposting. The book that's referenced there, this woman's a pretty respected and known author on the topic, and in fact that this site is a place to buy her book, though we're not advertising. These are really good, and that you can find others like it, but these are both EDU, all three are EDUs. They're from extension services at other universities. They are not redundant. They're not the same or duplicative. I'm going to start from the middle one. That's from Purdue. That is a research paper. Those are some researchers, probably graduate students, that did some studies. They're really aiming it at the kind of the commercial venue, those that make castings to sell and people that use castings for their produce, and they might have hundreds or thousands of tomato plants. And they did the study on a little bit more scientific about what goes into the worms and what comes out of the worms, and did the chemistry analysis on it and made recommendations. It's understandable. It's in lay terms. It's pretty interesting, but it is pretty deep. The next one, this is from Lincoln, Nebraska. That's a really good, right in between. It gets into a little bit of depth. It also gives a good overview. And the one on the bottom is really a good overview. Much less detailed, a one sheet about vermicomposting. That's really good. And that kind of concludes our portion of dumping information out there and sharing our experience. So this is where we'd, I think, defer to Sarah to see how we want to answer if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you, Tricia and Peter.